everyone. You are listening to the Future Money Podcast, presented by the Interledger Foundation, where we invite people of all backgrounds and disciplines to imagine a financially inclusive future. I'm Ayesha Ware, and today Chris Lawrence and I are in conversation with ILF Grantee and community member Adam Ware. Back in March, Adam announced that gFam, an awesome storytelling platform where creators earn tips and web monetization micropayments, was shutting down. We had an insightful discussion with Adam on why that decision was made, his thoughts on web monetization, and what his next moves might be.
Welcome to Future Money, Adam. It's wonderful to have you on the show.
Yes, thank you.
It's been a long time. Thank you for being here with us. This is great. Would you take some time to introduce yourself?
Of course. Hi, everybody. My name is Adam. I created a social media website called gFam.live. I have worked in cybersecurity for a long time myself, so I've always kind of been around tech. And I just saw a need and a space for some web monetization and some different monetization types of social media. So that's what I really want to build and experiment with. So I'm just a guy. I don't know how to code and stuff, but I want to put together a team to build something new and exciting and unique. I am currently in Australia, but I was in the US for 10 years, mainly doing cybersecurity stuff. So yeah, I feel a little bit worldly at this point.
What inspired the creation of gFam, and how did the mission evolve over time?
Yeah, so I was very interested in the Ninja Warrior TV show and obstacle courses. That was a big thing in America. So there's the television show, American Ninja Warrior, where people do obstacle courses and stuff. And so I was trying to get onto that. I was on Australian Ninja Warrior, and I found that
you were actually on Australia Ninja Warrior?
Yes, I did if you go into YouTube and put in my name, you'll see me do the course.
We'll put the links in the show notes for everyone.
Sure. So I found that a lot of my friends who I met through doing these obstacle courses, and that in America, there's lots of different local competitions and stuff. It's this whole big thing. I found that a lot of people were spending a lot of time on social media. They were trying to build up followers. They were getting hundreds of thousands of followers and were still kind of really poor. They just really couldn't getting money was hard. And I was like, how do these people have all these followers, all this engagement, and are earning absolutely nothing? So that's really what I want to try and change. I wanted to basically try and create a platform where creators were getting paid for their effort. That was the main inspiration behind it. It kind of changed over time. Initially, I didn't want to have any advertising because advertising does kind of ruin, incentive models and all that sort of stuff. And then found that over time, I kind of needed advertising just to bring some money into the ecosystem. The money does have to come from somewhere. And so it either comes from subscribers or advertisers. So that's really what it kind of evolved into over time.
Can you take a step back and just kind of give an overall explanation of what gFam was and is, and maybe then what's happened to it since we've sat here talking to you today?
So gFam initially was essentially a platform where people could post once per day, really just about anything that they liked. They usually had a photo and then some text. And yeah, they could post once per day, and they would either have web monetization subscribers where they would get funds for people viewing their content, or they could get tips using cryptocurrency like XRP. They could either post just something about their day, or they could create lessons. So they could put in tutorials and then kind of earn money that way. There was also challenges. So people could do tasks that someone else was willing to pay for. Might be respond to this tweet or something like that, where they could earn some extra money that way. So yeah, it was basically a very creator-centric platform where people had multiple avenues to earn revenue. It was running for a good 5 years, thanks to the Interledger Foundation and all the support and the community around that ecosystem. But eventually I found that we were using a lot of free tiered platforms to kind of pull together this bigger platform. And eventually the infrastructure costs just got too high. Basically, one thing we essentially we got too big, but our revenue didn't catch up. So we kind of got into like a weird space where our expenses kind of ballooned because we were popular, but our revenue didn't. And so we were just in that weird kind of spot where it was just very hard for it to be sustainable. So unfortunately, we shut down a couple of months ago. We were running for 5 years. We raised 190,000 USD in monetization for creators. We had over 282,000 views on the platform. 86,000 people had viewed the various content pieces on gFam from 149 countries. So yeah, like it was pretty popular. It was a nice little community. People basically came in every day and kind of live journaled. So I think for a lot of social media, it tends to be quite conflicting. People put the very best version of themselves or something that will create conflict or engagement in order to kind of monetize. Where I think on gFam, it was just a very lovely, supportive place where people were just kind of journaling, sharing their days, and happy to comment on others and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was just a really nice kind of platform to be on.
Did you ever think about how web monetization could have helped you raise the money for the hosting, done community days or were, campaigns along those lines with that community?
Yeah. So we did lots of little things like that. I think the problem was for us specifically, the content was really nice. It was really nice for creators, but I don't think there was a huge draw for content consumers. So essentially, like when you look at social media, advertisers are paying for that content to be there. So if you type a post into Facebook or Instagram or like any of the platforms, advertisers are really paying for that platform because they want to show you ads. So really, like when you put something on social media, it's really to get your friends and followers to look at ads. Where what we were finding is that there just wasn't a huge demand for people to view other people's like daily posts. Like it does seem nice, but not necessarily people want to pay for that. So that's kind of where we got a little bit stuck, is really with the content consumers bringing money into our platform. So yeah, we did kind of do like events and try to bring people in and try to bring in companies. That was really what the challenges were about, to bring in money from companies who may want people to do certain activities. But yeah, we're just kind of struggling to get enough of that to keep it sustainable.
Yeah, I do recall there were a few times when you would post on our community forum and just would ask us to reach out on your behalf, or we would share it forward to say, hey, Adam from gFam, he's looking for XYZ. And you would post quite often.
Yeah.
And we would try our best to support you in the work you were doing.
Yeah, which was great. And like the community that the Interledger Foundation has built is incredible. It's incredibly supportive. Everyone's really helpful, which is really like, I don't think gFam would have existed without that amazing community support.
So, well, one, Adam, I want to say that, it's brave to come and talk about something that ultimately you had to shut down, right? So
Yeah.
like, and, with success and failures and the sort of warts and all approach, I really appreciate, being willing to kind of talk about this and think about these issues, because you're in a much more sophisticated place, I'm sure, than you were 5 years ago about almost every part of this.
Yes.
Considering that it sounds like building this community that was more about peer support and kind of supporting each other, but then didn't have a mass appeal, to your point around advertising. I'd be curious, what did you learn about community in a different way? And then, if you were starting something similar right now, would you have different business models that really could be more community centric?
Yeah. So firstly, thank you. I think I am brave. But
well, you're an Australian ninja, for heaven's sakes.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think part of the problem was it maybe wasn't niche enough. And I think I actually would like to start again. As I mentioned earlier, I work in cybersecurity. So I think I would like to basically build something similar, but is very niche into cybersecurity. I think in that way, it might be easier to get advertisers who are specific in the cybersecurity world. So really a bit like a more, I don't know, a smaller niche, I think would be better. I think maybe the problem with gFam was that it was too broad. And so from an advertising point of view, there was no real advertisers that were particularly interested because it was just too broad and too many people from too many different countries. Advertisers really like to be, kind of regional based, of course. So yeah, I think if I was to do it again, I think part of the thing would be to be more of a niche in terms of subject, and then think about what are things people are willing to pay for. So, it is lovely to read about people's day. I learned a lot about lots of different people around lots of different countries. Like, I really loved seeing people's daily activities throughout all different countries to see, oh, people live kind of similar, but also wildly different to myself. That was awesome. But I think ultimately that's content that people aren't necessarily going to pay for. So really thinking about like, what is the content that people want to pay for? And I think that would make it a lot easier to monetize. It's kind of a shame, but that's kind of, I think, ultimately what I learned.
Yeah. When you think about your journey with gFam, can you share a specific moment or an anecdote that made you feel some sense of success? Like this is working for you and for the community overall?
Yeah. So I think there's like really lots of little instances like that. I think really one moment that kind of really stood out to me was pretty early on in the piece, where one of the people essentially bought land in Costa Rica with some of the earnings that they had made from gFam. And, obviously not entirely just from gFam, like there's lots of other things going, but to kind of see that journey and the person to like post photos and stuff like that was incredible. And then there was another moment not too long after that where someone had basically posted a dressmaking mannequin type thing that they were able to purchase through the monetization from their content on gFam. And that was able to expand their business. They were in Nigeria, so they already had like a dressmaking business. But for that to expand because of the monetization on gFam, it's like, oh, like we're actually really making a difference here. Like we're actually really improving people's lives. And, I think social media in the world, I'm not always sure if it's been a net good. It has a huge impact on our lives now. So it's really nice to be able to say, like, yes, this platform I think was a net good. Since I have shut it down, I've received so many messages from so many people that are a little bit sad that it has shut down. Obviously, a lot of those people were creators. They were earning fairly well on the platform, I guess, relatively to where they live in the world. But yeah, it was really sad. But ultimately, business is about finding those sustainable funding models. And gFam just wasn't quite there.
So it sounds like, as you described, kind of going more niche and maybe moving on to something within cyber security or something with a little bit more of a narrow focus. And then with the goal of attracting advertisers, have you come full circle about how you monetize things on the web, or what did you learn about web monetization and your journey there? And have you just ended up where if it's not an advertising platform, it's not going to work?
I don't think that's necessarily true. So I think you can have both. I don't think you necessarily need advertising. And I think part of the web monetization community has kind of shown that there are platforms that, are able to be funded entirely by web monetization, which is incredible. Part of the reason that I think it's important, or I think that I would want to niche down a little bit, is maybe better for advertisers, but also better for subscribers that are willing to pay for that content. So recently I had done a cybersecurity certification, and it was hell. It was so hard. It was so much knowledge. I studied for hundreds of hours. It was really difficult. One of the problems that I found was that a lot of IT people really learn by doing, but a lot of these kind of certifications are you just read. You read the thing and you have to essentially memorize that. So IT people aren't great at reading and learning like that. Like, that's great for lawyers and maybe doctors, like people who read a lot of text, but IT people generally get stuck in and they're playing with things, and that's how they learn. So I think if I was to niche down, I would basically create educational pieces that help people learn by doing, And I think that's something that people would be willing to pay for, because when I was going through it, I definitely would have paid for something like that. So, yeah, I think basically the infrastructure costs of creating a platform can get expensive, especially if you're hosting content. I mean, we weren't even hosting video and it was still really expensive. So to have images, to have content, to have different functionality, all kind of cost money. So there has to be a way to pay for that. So either you have a very generous benefactor, or you have subscribers that are willing to pay, or you have advertisers. So I don't think there's any hard and fast rules, but the money has to come from somewhere because it costs money. So I'm not sure if I've learnt a whole lot. I don't think I've come full circle in 5 years. I think I've just become a little bit more clear of like, one of the first questions is, where does the money come from? And that's a good place to start.
And how you sustain with the funding that you receive. Yeah, I get it. What's up, listeners? I recently collaborated with Grammy Award-nominated mixed media artist Carolyn Malachi, who teaches a course on advanced audio production at Howard University. The course challenges students to develop amazing audio projects, including film scores, audiobooks, and of course, podcasts. For the next few episodes of the Future Money podcast, we'll be sharing an exclusive audio piece about Interledger, produced and edited by one of Carolyn's students. Please enjoy this sample, created by Julia Monroe.
The Interledger Foundation believes better access to digital financial services can unlock opportunities in life and work. So we work with partners who have great ideas, insights, and innovations about building with open technology, because digital financial services should work for everyone, everywhere. We provide access and support to open standards and protocols that connect services into a global interoperable payments network called Interledger. You can apply for up to $75,000 to help bring your ideas to life. Our grants are focused on research and development, gathering future talent through education, open source fintech organizations, and individuals who motivate historically marginalized communities. Find out more and start your journey at interledger.org/grants.
I am amazed by the remarkably talented students at Howard University. Let me tell you, I've seen firsthand how Carolyn's course has equipped them with the practical skills and real-world experience needed to excel in the audio industry, and I cannot wait to see what they all do next. Now back to the show.
So you've been an advocate and an experimenter in web monetization and open payments and a variety of things along these lines, and a valuable member of the community. Where would you like to see it go? Where can it mature where that it would be able to be, a realistic part of a business plan for, a platform or a publisher or other kinds of web content?
Yeah. So one of the things that I found was a little bit frustrating is when I started to move towards more of an advertiser model to bring in more funds. One thing I really found was with something like a Google AdSense, for example, if basically someone clicks on an ad and they are from a more wealthy country, United States, United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, as an advertiser, you receive, let's say, 58 cents per click. If someone comes in from a less wealthy country, so, Venezuela or Nigeria, something like that, then you only get 1 cent. So someone coming in from Australia basically provides 58 times the revenue coming in. And I just found that was, I understand it. Advertisers, they want people from countries with more disposable income to buy their products, all that sort of stuff. I understand that. But it feels like a very short-term thinking. Like, obviously, like people from developing countries, like there's a lot of potential. People are working really hard. They're really smart. They're really trying to like make things work. And so if you're kind of ignoring people from those countries, then you're not thinking long-term. You're not building for the long term. You're really just thinking in that very short-term manner of like, who has money right now? Where can I get that money right now? And so I think what I'd really love to see in terms of like the ecosystem growing is really that focus on developing countries. I think from a social media point of view, one of the things that I really want to build was a lack of the gatekeepers. So when you think of social media, you think of these huge tech companies, these huge tech platforms that really protect their own, I guess, real estate, their digital real estate. And so they can kick people off whenever they want. They can tweak algorithms that could essentially bankrupt small businesses. There's really so much power that these platforms have that we have kind of given them because we like going onto these platforms and we get a lot of value from going on the platforms, but they do control a lot. And so I think web monetization is a really exciting development that can open that up and kind of bring the internet back to where it was previously, I guess, in the Web 1 manner, where people were just doing lots of different stuff. And you'd go to different websites and you'd basically, like, it was hard to kind of remember all the different websites that you went to, but you got a lot of value from those websites instead of having everything like so protected and so gate kept.
It's not lost on me that you referenced something like this, and then this is something that I always found about gFam, was I think it has a kind of live journal, GeoCities, kind of Web 1.0 vibe, right? Was that an overt aesthetic choice by you? What sort of drove that? Because I think it did harken back to that, maybe even some people out there, MySpace is an example of that, of how much more modular MySpace was, how much user control you could have around how it looked, et cetera, et cetera. We've lost lots of that in these jumps to, beyond that early version of the web. And you did seem to connect back to that. Was that intentional or accidental, or how'd that come about?
It was entirely accidental. It was, basically like I was learning to code at the same time. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was experimenting. I was kind of copying things that I liked. No, it was entirely accidental and did kind of evolve over time because initially I thought the lessons and stuff like that, I thought that's where people would spend a lot of their time. So I could see teachers creating content for students, that kind of thing. I thought that might be the kind of thing that people would want to pay for. But really, the content creators were just really excited to share nice things about their day. So it kind of evolved based on the content creators that gFam was getting. So no, totally accidental. My first social media was MySpace, so maybe it was in the back of my mind a little bit. But yeah, no, it's just the kind of way it evolved through someone who had never built something like this before. But I like that kind of freeness of the internet. gFam wasn't collecting anyone's data. We were really specific about that. Really just people had their email address, their username, and a wallet address or their payment pointer. And that was it. That's all that we were collecting, which advertisers don't love that, but we were trying to be really focused on the content creators and the users.
You talked about someone who they were able to buy land in Costa Rica.
Yep.
How successful were they? Were they able to continue monetizing future forward, or did it at some point, drop off at some point for them?
Yeah, so they were one of the initial users of gFam, and I think initially the platform was paying a lot more. I think, there was the novelty factor. People were kind of excited about this new type of platform. So we were bringing in, I guess, a lot more money. And so those early initial content creators were actually making quite a lot. And so that particular user was a great content creator, first and foremost, really good at just creating excitement and enthusiasm around their content. But yeah, they kind of dropped off after a little bit. I think they basically, had bought land in Costa Rica. They were basically planning to build some kind of a healing kind of center there. And I'm not sure if that necessarily went ahead. But yes, really incredible content creator. I think over time, people were just earning a lot less, quite dramatically so. And it was just because we were struggling to bring money into the platform. A little unfortunate. It's just we didn't want to be enthusiasm based, but I think over the 5 years, that's kind of how it turned out.
You mentioned a little bit ago, some ideas around where revenue comes from, why we're sort of profiling people with Google AdSense, and some of these broken but necessary tools. I'd be curious, being the proprietor, the builder, the organizer, what'd you kind of learn about digital financial inclusion, which I'm sure was not something that you had much knowledge of when you started this, but on the other side of it, it seems like you have some pretty sophisticated views about, where the pain points are.
Yeah. Digital financial inclusion never came up in my cybersecurity studies. It just wasn't a thing. And so, it's something that I did learn a lot about throughout that process. One of the big pain points was initially with web monetization, because it was facilitated through the XRP cryptocurrency. I found that a real pain point in terms of getting people onboarded, because a lot of people were like, why can't I just earn USD? Like, I'm in America. Why can't I just earn USD? Why can't I be paid through Venmo? And trying to explain, Venmo, PayPal, they charge massive fees even for really, really small transactions. And so for a lot of web monetization, the individual transactions are tiny, but they accumulate over time. And so paying fees on each one of those transactions is impossible, essentially. And so using things like XRP or other kind of technologies, that was a sticking point for onboarding. People don't really want, or really didn't understand what a digital wallet was. That was like, in terms of onboarding someone onto gFam, I really had to teach them about all these different kind of concepts. And that would often scare a lot of people away. And so I think the direction that the Interledger Foundation is going in terms of payment pointers and web monetization, basically being digital wallets that are not related to cryptocurrency, I think is a huge benefit. I think personally that would have made onboarding for me 5 years ago way, way easier. And I think essentially people in the US maybe don't understand how expensive international transaction fees can be, which when you start to talk to people in lots of other countries, they very much understand how expensive those fees are. And so onboarding people from other countries was actually a lot easier for me than onboarding people from America, the UK, Australia, Canada, those kind of countries. So it's huge. I would often onboard people who were happy to set up a digital wallet, but may not have had like a credit card. Some of the payment systems in terms of that KYC or, know your customer, having an online presence that can be proven was actually quite hard for a lot of people in a lot of different countries because they didn't have a credit card or they didn't have a debit card. They weren't banked. And that made it really hard to kind of build them into these kind of technologies. So it was such a thing for the gFam platform because the people who really wanted to join the platform may not have had the technologies or the financial inclusion infrastructure that they needed. And the people that did have it didn't really see the need to use these other technologies because they had never known that pain. So it was very interesting to learn. And it was a great experience for me to understand the struggles that maybe the majority of people in the world have these struggles, and me coming from a more privileged country just did not understand that.
Yeah, I know about those international fees and
yes,
working with grantees from varying parts of the world, that those fees can be exorbitant. And how do you mitigate those? And it can be crushing at times.
And we were sending out hundreds of transactions per day, all for tiny amounts. But we could never existed if we had to pay fees on every single one of those transactions.
I remember signing up for my payment pointer back in 2020.
Yes.
That was fun. I probably still have it somewhere. Adam, how has your understanding of community evolved over the last 5 years with Grant for the Web, Interledger, and your own gFam community?
I guess I didn't realize that community is everything. Really, people are social animals. We rely on each other. We rely on our families. We rely on our friends. We rely on the communities that we have in our workplaces, all that sort of stuff. Truly, we cannot survive without community. And so building community, I think, is maybe one of the best skills that we as people can learn. And so for me to be able to tap into the existing community of the Interledger Foundation, I also tapped into the Ninja Warrior community, the cybersecurity community, some different cryptocurrency content platform communities. I was able to tap into all of those And that eventually kind of evolved into this really sweet, really supportive gFam community of people that came from all these different places, but became really supportive of each other because they were just reading nice little things about each other each day. So the platform itself built a community that was just very sweet, which I think is kind of rare in a social media point of view, because a lot of social media, it promotes a lot of conflict to get that engagement, to keep people on the platform, to sell ads. Because gFam was community focused, it grew into this really nice place, as opposed to being algorithmically engagement focused, which can promote a lot of conflict. So yeah, it just became very pleasant, but community was such a big part of it. And obviously, social media can't exist without community. If you have no interest in being social, social media doesn't exist. And that's one of the things that I found really frustrating about a lot of social media platforms is they would not exist without us volunteering our content. And yet for them to not really pay us is a little insulting almost, really. Like, we are giving them so much and we're not getting that much out of it, but we are getting obviously what we want, or else we wouldn't be there. So because we crave that social community, I think a lot of people on social media crave community and that's why they're there, but we're being taken advantage of, I think.
I'd even say it's a step worse than that in terms of not only are you not being compensated for basically providing, content in a user base, but then they bring you in with this idea of community or connectivity, and then they change the algorithm and you don't see your feed anymore.
Yep.
They push through the big players in the publishing field and those get, the algorithm will value those more. And so they get you in, hey, you can reconnect with your family, reconnect with your friends, reconnect with your interests, blah, blah, blah. But then slowly over the time, they just become really more one-way broadcast channels after a while, especially with going to the highest bidder. So it's like you don't get compensated. Our creative and intellectual and social output was the reason we're there and the reasons there are there. And once critical mass has gotten to that, then they just turn it into broadcast. I mean, what is that? Cory Doctorow calls it, right? The enshittification of our, so I think it was like Webster's word of the year or something like that last year. Yeah. So, but you basically just downgrade to like some baseline, like where can we just shovel as much advertisement in you as possible? So it's like exploiting you while it rips you off.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like a huge conversation around content creators versus influencers. And content creators do a lot of work. Influencers like, hey, come, here's a brand, say you use it, and you're influencing, while the content creators out here doing the hard work. They're paving, the ground, trying to get people to pay attention. And I even have to at times create my own algorithm so I can see the content, which is just insane.
Then you have to proactively retrain feeds just so you see your friends, family, and interests.
There you go.
And if we put another layer on that, like I think a lot of like countries have now had their politics affected by these social media algorithms. So really, like, it affects every part of our life now. Maybe not great, maybe not ideal. So yeah, it is something that we need to be really conscious of. And I think, this push towards decentralizing the internet and, content creators maybe owning their own platforms or owning their own little areas. I haven't spent a lot of time on like the Federation Mastodon space, but I love that concept. And I think that is something I'd like to like spend a little bit more time on. I think that is kind of the direction that we need to go for our own mental health and survival. But again, like, where does the money come from? Like, how do we pay for that infrastructure? And maybe that's something, we're now getting very good at paying for streaming platforms and spending lots of little bits of money all over the internet. And so maybe as citizens of the internet, maybe we need to pay a little bit ourselves to take a lot of that power out of those bigger platforms.
I think there's a rising appetite for it. But if I had one, and this is self-reflective too, but if I have one sort of general critique and self-critique of work at Interledger and other places I've been involved in, is it like, it also can't feel like eating your vegetables either, right? Like doing the values-based thing, we have to also make that more appealing and not just at a, altruism level. right? So like, because these things are hard.
Yeah. There has to be a reason for people to log in.
Right. And sometimes they're hard. You have to do, no one wants to create a string of servers to post, I had a great day. You want to see a pic, right? So like, like it also has to not feel like, how do we not make it feel like work too for folks?
It can feel like work. You want to post something that's like, oh, I got to do this so people can pay me attention. And then I'm like, oh, if I didn't do something in 24 hours, no one's going to pay attention to me. And then I'm like, what am I doing? I've fallen into the trap too.
I've got a friend that has set up a new retail fashion store. And so, she's got a space, she's got the product, she's got the dresses, and it's all very lovely and very cute. But she now has to spend so much time on social media, creating organic content, and then paying for ads to bring people to the physical store. And lots of people are walking past, and that's great, but you've still got to bring people in. And so people are now dependent on social media for their small businesses. And again, I mentioned before, a small algorithmic tweak, and suddenly you could go bankrupt because people aren't seeing your store anymore. And that's very upsetting.
Yeah.
Oy vey. Well, Adam, the show's called Future Money. And, I think one thing that we've realized here at Interledger Foundation is sometimes, we also have to get people in the space where they're imagining what might be next. I kind of sometimes like to jokingly refer to us as near futurists, because when people talk about futurists, generally they're like, oh, in 2172 we can expect, and it's all these kind of sci-fi things. But I'd like to get people in that same kind of creative headspace that's 3, 5, 7, 10 years out, right? Things that feel like tangible or just out in front of us, because if we don't imagine the more positive versions of those things, then we're not going to be able to build them, right? You have to sort of imagine them first in that creative space. And that's one thing that I've always admired about you, is that I think you kind of live in that space sometimes. So if you could predict, where this kind of intersection of money and social media and the web, like where do you see it going? What is your near future predictions?
Yeah, so I really think that we have to have a more decentralized social media. I think we really need to invest into developing countries. Like, there is so much promise and potential there. I saw this quote recently, and it was about, you can't run a country like a business, because a business is all about, exploiting the resources that it has to make profit. You really have to run a country like a household, where in a household, you are using the resources to look after everyone within that household. And I think that's what we can use the internet for. We can use the internet to basically help bring everyone together, bring developing countries, established countries, bring people together. I learned so much about other people on gFam, about how they live. That was really exciting. It was a really great journey. I'm so glad that people were willing to share about their daily lives. And I think hopefully that's what the future holds. It basically helps bring people up. Essentially, we have one planet, Chris. We have one planet, and we really, our future survival depends on all of us working together. And I think part of that future is everyone coming together, but in a decentralized way, not necessarily having gatekeepers, but having lots and lots of different people that are putting in the boring work for the infrastructure. More people realizing, oh, we need to pay for the boring work of infrastructure to build the thing that we want, that doesn't have the gatekeepers that we've traditionally had. So I'm really excited about the future, about what the Interledger Foundation can do, what other areas can do that have found like, oh, we don't want what we've currently got. I think there is a huge, very exciting future in decentralization, in decentralized finance. There's a lot to be very enthusiastic about.
Well, what's next for you, Adam? You mentioned the cybersecurity. What is Adam's next chapter?
Yeah, so I think I want to bring in what I learned from gFam and what I've learned from the Interledger Foundation and that community. And basically, I think what I'd like to do is build a place where people can learn about cybersecurity, whether they are trying to go for one of these certifications, which are very boring, or they've been having issues themselves and they want to learn about cybersecurity stuff. Unfortunately, I think we're going to see a lot more cyber attacks. I think generative AI might make it easier to attack people. And so I think a lot of smaller businesses and medium-sized businesses that have previously been ignored might then start to be attacked. So I really just want to create like an educational space based on cybersecurity. I want to bring in web monetization for cybersecurity experts or anyone who can share their stories that might be valuable to other people, or want to create educational content that might be beneficial to other people. I think essentially I want to build something similar to gFam, but just more of a niche. And if that really works, there's no reason why that can't be expanded into other niches. I truly think that gFam was unique in the world, and I still think it was a good model. Just got to figure out where that money comes from to support the infrastructure.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Adam. We look forward to following along and seeing what you do next and help carve out this future that we're all collectively trying to build.
Thank you for your very excellent questions.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Future Money Podcast. Adam has been one of our longest active community members at Interledger. So we want to thank him again for taking this time to share his thoughts with us, and we look forward to seeing what the future holds for him and web monetization. We hope you enjoyed today's interview. You can listen to other great episodes of Future Money on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the podcatcher of your choice. If you're not following us already, don't forget to subscribe on the platform of your choice so that you never miss an episode. See you next time.